3 issues of data. In order to challenge power imbalances, we have to begin by analyzing how power operates in the world. In this video we will look at 3 different issues of data: bias in data, the two-edged sword of representation in data, and how data is the new oil. The issues of bias in data. There are many algorithms and systems in our lives that promote bias. When we look at data, we are rarely aware of bias in the data, especially if it is from a national organization. According to D'Ignazio and Klein, so what were these complications more precisely? And how many women had actually died as a result? Nobody was counting. In 2018, USA Today investigated these racial disparities and found what was an even more fundamental problem. There was still no national system for tracking complications sustained in pregnancy and childbirth, even though similar systems had long been in place for tracking any number of other health issues, such as teen pregnancy, hip replacements, or heart attacks. What we choose to measure is a statement of what we value in health, he explains. We might edit his statement to add that it's a measure of who we value in health too. It appears that sexual assault reporting rates at universities vary from survey to survey. Based on the presented evidence, this suggests that there are imbalances of power in the data. It is plausible to suggest a solution to gender bias. Castaneda et al. Points out that we should set a reasonable gender distribution among each category of experts working in the extraction/collection, pre-processing, and analysis of data. One could argue that it is important to eliminate bias from all datasets because of the privilege and power of bias. It appears that bias is integrated into the lives of the privileged and therefore also unrecognizable for them. Additionally, the system that is created by the privileged is reinforcing biases based on gender, race, and so on. In 2018, Amazon developed an algorithm to screen applicants, favoring the male applicants. It appears that if the data team is primarily composed of people from the dominant privileged group, their perspective becomes overly influential in the decision-making process by excluding other identities and perspectives. D'Ignazio and Klein observes that this is the privilege hazard, the phenomenon that makes those who occupy the most privileged positions among us, those with good educations, respected credentials, and professional accolades, so poorly equipped to recognize instances of oppression in the world. To conclude, the evidence indicates that it is often the non-privileged marginalized groups who notice and point out biases, even though the creators of the system have that responsibility. The double-edged sword of representation. When it comes to justice in the digital realm, representation is often brought up. Lack of representation is to blame for a number of challenges faced by marginalized groups. Despite this, D'Ignazio and Klein note that better detection of faces of color cannot be characterized as an unqualified good. More often than not, it is enlisted in the service of increased oppression, greater surveillance, and targeted violence. While representation is important for minorities and marginalized groups, it seems that simple inclusion is not enough to rectify the oppressive nature of Western society. As tech companies scramble to modernize their data in the spirit of representation, they may fail to consider the way these technologies will be used. The fight to be represented may also be a fight to be surveilled. While some uses may seem innocent, a lot of the technologies using data, especially facial recognition, are used to monitor the population or even used as evidence for arrests. To quote UN Human Rights spokesperson Jeremy Lawrence, the Tehran head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) announced the creation of a new body to enforce existing mandatory hijab laws, adding that IRGC members have been trained to do so in a more serious manner in public spaces. Reports indicate that hundreds of businesses have been forcibly closed for not enforcing compulsory hijab laws, and surveillance cameras are being used to identify women drivers not complying with the laws. Representative datasets used for facial recognition could potentially cause harm to these women. While the data may be representative, this is not necessarily in the population's best interest, illustrating the fact that representative data is not always a good thing. Fixing the issues around misrepresentative datasets is considered a big priority. However, if a society is run by an oppressive power, this simply is not enough. If these technologies are to be used in a favorable manner, there needs to be a fundamental systemic change. This is what D'Ignazio and Klein talk about when they bring up the principles of examining and challenging power. Data is the new oil. Over the past decade, data has long been described as the new oil. According to D'Ignazio and Klein, the idea of data as some sort of untapped natural resource clearly points to the potential of data for power and profit once they are processed and refined, but it also helps highlight the exploitative dimensions of extracting data from their source, people, as well as their ecological cost. Just as the original oil barons were able to use their riches to wield outsized power in the world, so too do the targets of the world use their corporate gain to consolidate control over their customers. But unlike crude oil, which is extracted from the earth and then sold to people, data are both extracted from people and sold back to them, in the form of coupons like the one the Minneapolis teen received in the mail, or far worse. As noted by Hirsch, the phrase was updated to "big data is the new oil." Studies have found the great value that data has as a resource for the information economy, like oil has been for the industrial economy. However, oil also leads to oil pollution, contributes to the greenhouse effect and consequently to climate change. In comparison, big data also has many benefits but damages our privacy because of the hackers and criminals that steals our information and the human errors that occurs in data breaches. Big data generates layers of personal information in the public light, which obstructs the growth of the human personality that requires shelter to grow. The sense that we're living in a glasshouse influences human growth and is called the glasshouse effect. Experts agree that analogies can help us to understand problems and to develop solutions. For example, different anti-pollution acts were successful in reducing oil tanker spills. Therefore, if we apply laws to privacy and use the benefits of big data, it will reverse the current glasshouse effect. There is ample evidence that if big data is used for surveillance, a backlash could be the legal and ethical questions about tracking law-abiding residents. Privacy concerns must therefore be addressed and prevented. Big data is changing our social climate. The internet is open, but at the same time, we turn into a society of surveillance where we feel under observation and pressured to adapt. The analogy of data and oil allows us to see big data's potential for good things and at the same time, its threatening results. Hirsch points out that this is the power of analogy and that we should use it. Ultimately, there are many issues related to data and technology where feminism should be applied to challenge the unequal power structures and work towards justice.